This mare is a great example of how teaching your horse to drop the head, especially a high-headed horse, can really get them to gait. Alright, so this mare was ridden on the shanked bit, so I switched the reins now to the snaffle, but they were on the lower shanked rings. So if you watch her, she's very pacey. She's got her head up in the air, got her nose out, isn't really giving her nose at all. But what we're wanting to see is that teach her to drop her head and to see if she can start gaiting. Alright, so I'm going to be working with her to get her to drop her head. It's like I'm riding her in a snaffle. I'm probably going to work her, or most horses, on a small circle. Usually it's hard to get a horse like this that's bracing to drop their head in a straight line. So you're going to start at the walk, and you're going to gently put pressure on both reins. Again, gently. We're not going to pull, we're going to hold steady pressure. Now you're also going to be, it's also important where you put your hands. You don't want your hands too high, and you don't want them down by your knees, and my knees are higher because stirrups are short for this saddle. But you're going to keep them right about close to the pommel of the horse, where you'd carry them if you were a dressage rider, is more of in a neutral position. And you're going to, again, go in a small circle. So here I'm going to circle to the left. I'm putting pressure on my left rein and also pressure on the outside rein or the right rein. And as soon as she either brings her nose in or drops her head, drop the reins. Let me say that again. Hold gentle pressure with both reins. If she brings her nose in toward her chest or drops her head, drop the reins and praise her. That's what the response we're looking for, is for her to bring her nose in or drop her head. Really quick note, if the horse is tossing their head up and down or bobbing their head, it doesn't count. But anytime they soften, drop their head, or bring their nose toward the chest, just like that mare did right there, we release. Let's go back and look at that in slow motion, what she did. So here you can see me take up light contact, keeping her on a circle again. It's not teeny tiny, but it's also not a big, huge circle. Light contact. I am not actually pulling. I'm just trying to take a feel on the reins. And what I'm watching is trying to see her soften. And just riding, I'll use my legs just to ask her to go forward. So just see how I put her nose up. She's resisting. I'm not pulling any harder, just maintaining the contact. Watching for her to soften and kind of relax her jaw. There. Loose rein. And let her go forward. Just like that. And now, the thing is, we're going to be asking this again and again with the goal of getting the horse to really drop their head, preferably down to their knees. Again, drop their head all the way down to the ground, below their knees, like a quarter horse. Alright, so we're going to see if we can keep getting her to drop her head a little, and drop it farther down. Already, she's walking a little slower on her own. It's important to go both directions, but you can do a few turns in one direction and then go the other direction. Try not to get too dizzy. Remember, our goal is to get our horse to soften. So we're holding pressure, looking for her to bring her nose in or to drop her head, and then we release. And our goal is to get the horse to drop their head even farther down. And every horse is going to be different, but don't think because your horse is high-headed now or has always been that way that they can't drop their head all the way down. This is kind of like a stretch for them, or where they're not using the muscles in their neck as much to hold themselves. They're using the ligament that runs over the top line to hold the weight of their head, and it lets those muscles in the neck that are usually tight and tense relax and release and not have to hold. It also helps them lift their shoulders and lift their back just by dropping their head. It's a great way to get your horse to relax and be calm. Now, I'm not going over the poles on purpose, they just happen to be there. I'm looking for her. Now, notice her head is fairly level now. That's very, very nice. But when I'm asking for head down, I would really like to see it much, much lower than this. So, like I said, all the way down to her knees or lower is ideal. And so even though her head is down lower than we first started, I can keep asking her to drop it. Now, just to talk about it, the next step will be, once you get this done very, very well, then you can start working when you go faster. So you do this at the walk till your horse knows it, and then you'd ask for a little bit more speed and teach her, no matter what gait she's doing, that she can drop her head. Now you do this if your horse is pacey or trotty, but it is especially important to get the head very low with a pacey horse, like this mare. But even when you're training a trotty horse, if they don't know how to drop their heads on cue, you'll miss a lot of the softness and calmness that we work on. Good. So now I'm just asking her to drop her head, and then I release. And when I release, I do let her go straight. Now, when I did this lesson in Idaho, and only have an hour to work with these horses. So normally I would take more breaks. You see, I'll stop and give her a break there. Normally I would take more breaks while doing this. You can already see the mare is settling down. And again, if I was training this horse at home, I'd probably put a different bit in her mouth to try. But again, you notice I'm just stopping and letting her rest. Even on a time limit where I only have an hour to work with horse, stopping and just letting the horse take a breather is really, really important. All right, so we're just going to continue asking for the head down. Now I notice this mare seems a little bit stiff through her poll and her neck. This is not very surprising because a lot of gaited horses tend to be stiff. She has a harder time bending, but that's a very nice soften there. You can kind of see the really beautiful shape her neck has compared to her when she first started. And we'll go back and look at that in just a minute. But you notice there she's be resisting the pressure. Don't pull harder. Don't start yanking. Just hold that consistent pressure and be very, very quick to release. Because the release is where she's learning. She's kind of fighting that. We're trying to say, no, hold that. Feel that pressure. Drop your head. I'll give you that release. And her neckline is, it will look beautiful if she can keep her head down. And she's just a gorgeous mare. But when she puts her head up, she's bulging at the base of the neck. She's pushing down the base of the neck. She's falling on her shoulders and not carrying herself well. And for these gaited horses, we're looking for them to be balanced. I'm just doing a little bit of a vibration on the inside rein as she's resisting. If I do a little bit of a tremor or vibration, she can't resist as much, but I'm not trying to jerk on her. I'm not trying to pull harder. You gotta wait. Now, a normal training day, I might have already been done with asking for head down because of how well she did right there. Give her a release, and you notice how much slack is in my reins. It's not just a little teeny tiny release. When she does it, I pretty much go what's called on the buckle or letting the rein really drape. So if you watch her walk, she's still pretty pacey, but we're working towards seeing her drop her head, which will lead us into a nicer gait, hopefully. But we have to get head down. Head down is very important. Head down, relaxed, soft. And some people will say, what about using draw reins or things like that? But we really want her to be able to put her head down without those things. We don't want her to be. Now we're going to work and see if we can get her to gait. Now I'll go over the ground poles, and the poles again are just to kind of break up the pace. Notice her high head. My goal is to get her to go a little bit faster and drop her head. So I'm holding the pressure and ask there, look at that line underneath her neck when she kept her head down. That's really what I'm looking for. With any pacey horse, I'm going to nag them about keeping their head down. I'm not going to jerk on them, but I really, really want them to be able to drop their head. So I'm looking for her to drop her head over the poles and just a little bit of speed. Really briefly, one common error you'll get with gaited horses is letting them go too fast. See how slow she is? That's what I'm looking for. We can get speed later, but it's harder for them to hold that nice gait or to keep their head down and go fast. They just don't have the balance or the strength for it yet. Again, she had a nice little bit of gaiting. She kept her head down there. We'll go back and watch that, but then you can see I'm giving her a chance to have a break. So here, I asked her to bring her nose in. I gave her a loose rein, and she continued to drop her head on that loose rein. Now, one thing that's really important for you to think about is that she drops her head when she gets a loose rein. A lot of these horses must have a loose rein before they'll start dropping their heads. So be quick to release, even if you're not sure. Give the release when in doubt. Obviously, all horses are different, but one of the biggest things I see is people are reluctant or hesitant or not sure when to release. Yes, it is hard. I make it look easy, but you want to keep making sure your horse has the option of that loose rein. You're going to ask for head down. If your horse gives it, release the reins. If your horse puts his head up, don't worry. That's normal. Many of the horses I work with do that. Ask the horse to drop the head again. It's pretty simple. We're going to keep asking the horse to drop the head. When they drop it or soften or bring their nose in, we release. See how I released right there when she brought her nose in? And as soon as she puts her head up, I'll take up the slack and ask her to drop her head. And as soon as she softens, drops her head like right there, I'll give a little bit of a release, pressure, watching for her to drop her head. And I won't ask her to speed up over the poles if her head's not down. She kind of sped up on her own there. See how high her head is? I've held pressure, and as soon as she drops her head, I release. And you can see she's getting much, much faster about dropping her head every time. And that's just really, really nice. So see how high that head is? Not exactly what I want, but you notice I ask for her to drop her head. See there, I'm just kind of holding, going on a turn. As soon as she's going to drop her head, there, I'll give her a little release, see if she'll drop her head, there, and head goes back up. A lot of times you'll see a direct correlation. Your horse might be gaiting, but they'll lose the gait when they put their head up. Or, to say it another way, the horse is gaiting, they lose their balance or are unable to maintain the gait because they've lost their balance or they're not strong enough. As a result, the head goes up and they're now pacing or doing a stepping pace. So you'll find a direct relation with where the level of the head is and whether your horse is able to gait or not. Good. I like that. She's carrying herself much better, much more willing to drop her head. That was lovely, lovely, lovely. Remember, when your horse does something like that, stop and praise like I did. That's excellent. It's exactly what we want. So there's one other way that you can ask for head down, and it's more of a dressage way. So if you're a dressage rider, this will probably make a lot of sense. You're going to take up pressure on the reins, just like I was showing you, and you're going to hold that pressure until you feel the horse try to put his head down and sort of pull the reins out of your hands. You to let the reins slide through your fingers and let them sort of, what's the phrase is, stretch into the bit or go on the bit, where they're actually almost seeking downward and forward with their nose. And what this does is it telescopes their spine or makes it longer, and their pole goes forward and the top of their neck gets longer as opposed to the bottom of their neck. So that's another thing you can try, and hopefully I'll be able to do a video more on that. But this one is more of a generic video of what most horses will do. So let's take a look at another time where she was gaiting nicely on a loose rein. So just some more slow motion here. You can see the reins are fairly loose, except when I ask her to put her head down. She softens right there, brings her nose into her chest. She's got slack in those reins. She's putting her head even farther down before she loses her balance right here and puts her head up, which again is very, very common. So, to recap, we took this mare, who at the beginning of the lesson right here was very bracy, head up, very pacey, and very stiff. And in about 30 minutes, we were able to get her to drop her head softly and to start gaiting like this. Now keep in mind, even an even lower headset is even better. Remember, down to the ground, and even though this mare didn't do it, in a couple of days I'm sure she'd have dropped her head even more.